Yo, it's centralparkhiphop.com. Huh. Kick it. Greetings, peace everybody. Welcome to the Art of Hip Hop podcast. My name is Derek, and today I am joined by 3-2
What's up? How you doing?
and Hiding to Be Found.
Hello.
Hey, so today's episode, we're going to be discussing the origin story myth. We're going to cover the basics, the who, what, when, where, how, and most importantly, the why of how hip hop got started, or at least the most commonly received story of how hip hop got started. And the way today's episode is going to go, I'm going to give my opening statement. I'm going to lay out my case for how I think it kind of came together. And then I'd like to get your guys' comments on my view. So the common story goes like this. Once upon a time, August 11th, 1973, there was a back-to-school party held in the rec room of a West Bronx, New York apartment building. And I got to say West Bronx because Jex corrected me. I always assumed it was the South Bronx. It's not the South Bronx. It's on the west side. In the New York apartment building at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. The party was given by Clive Campbell, a.k.a. DJ Kool Herc, for his sister Cindy, and history calls it the first hip-hop party ever held. Now, like myths are useful. They can help explain things and help you to understand complex and opaque topics. But sometimes they elevate things to like an undeserved height. Now I'm totally ready to give this party its due. It was an extremely important party. I'm going to tell you why in just a second. But nobody woke up the next morning talking about, man, that was a dope hip hop party I went to last night. Because the term hip hop didn't exist in 1973. So to call it the first hip hop party is a misnomer. Just as an aside, if you ever go look, you can go look online, I think, and find the flyers for this party. It said it went till 4 a.m. That's just sounds crazy to me, but 4 a.m. That's how they got down. Now, this party was a hip hop party, and that's because the four core artists that we talk about, the breakers, the rappers, the DJs, and the graffiti artists were all there and they were represented to the fullest. But what Herc did that night made these type of parties the glue that held hip hop together in the beginning. And I'm going to argue that hip hop parties are still the glue that's holding the culture together today. What did Herc do that night at the party? So if Puffy, I probably shouldn't even mention Puffy right now, given the condition that Puffy's on. But you remember when Puffy had that song, like he created the remix?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember
So
hearing
Puffy
that.
created the remix, then Herc created the breakbeat. And we'll cover the breakbeat more when we talk about DJs and stuff like that. But the quick definition says that it's a mixing technique that he adapted from Jamaican dub music, and it loops the percussion sections of a song, aka the break. So he played these two copies of the same record, and he would switch back and forth between them to extend the break section. And he really wasn't a technician. Like, he was really kind of sloppy. He wasn't really technically all that good. But dancers went crazy. Breakers just lost their minds, man. And it really, really, really amped up the party. And it made his parties really special. He called the technique the merry-go-round. And this breakbeat turntablism has remained influential to this very day in hip-hop, DJing, rapping, and breaking. Now, why did he do it? This is the real critical question. He says he wanted to get the party hyped. He said he wanted to get it going. Basically, he wanted to enhance his performance. So here we are 50 years later, party's still going. Got to give him props. It did change the world. That's not a myth. That's a reality. But what I want to say about the why he did it. Hip hop started as a performance art. Sylvia, who we talked about the last episode, her contribution kind of flipped it to a recording art. Prior to that, you had to hold your own. You had to be able to show and prove live. It was a performance-based art. And if you can't enhance your performance, Ice-T has this saying, and I thought it was really great. He says that the standard, the bar for hip hop should be high, should be difficult. Because if you're just doing what everybody else is doing, then you're not special. Why should you get recognition? He's like, stars are stars because they're out of reach. But if everybody can do what you do, you're not a star. You're just common. So the performance aspect was really big in the beginning, opening days of hip hop. And Herc, in my opinion, was simply trying to enhance his performance. He wasn't trying to create a movement, but he wound up creating a movement. And I'll give him credit for that. So anyway, that's my opening statement. Like to get your comments on it, rebuttals, corrections, your thoughts. Let's start with you. Hiding to be found.
I don't really have any rebuttals or anything for that. A lot of this is not new information, I guess, but like not stuff I really thought about a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning as I'm sitting in here with you right now.
Sure. 3-2. How about you? What do you think about DJ Herc's contribution to hip hop?
I think that it's a good thing it's good that we're calling it the myth, because now it seems like every year that goes by where we celebrate hip hop getting older, you start hearing, especially right around that anniversary of the party, you start hearing more and more old heads being like, he wasn't the original one and all that stuff. But right. It's like we get to the point where the history books need something. Right. And when you have something that turns into a movement that starts off as like a grassroots thing, where it's an activity that's kind of like an isolated neighborhood thing, of course, there's a lot of people that are never going to be known to us that were doing it at the same time in the same area. But because we don't know them, but we also need something to pinpoint where all of this converged. And correct. We're never going to get the finite exact who was the first exact person to do so
right.
We're at the point where we're almost like basing it off of a general foundation. And so this is like the best focal point that we can find for where all of the elements converged in one space and started, like that's where the seed was starting to sprout. There may have been other seeds that were planted at the same time, but maybe this was the most prolific one to sprout of all of them. And then everything else just started elevating from that. But because this was the most notable party, because DJ Herc was the most notable DJ at the time, then it's just one of those things where I feel like we gotta take it for what it is and accept it as the starting point, knowing that there's obviously some stuff we're not going to know.
Correct. Now, but I got to give Herc props because his merry-go-round technique was his.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, like you said, like the 4 core artists, they were at parties before. He had thrown parties before. But you have to do something. And this was the night that he broke out his merry-go-round technique. And that is a very critical element to DJing. It's the foundation of hip hop DJing. For real.
Absolutely.
So speaking of performance enhancers, I got questions for you guys. Well, let me back up. Would you agree that hip hop in its, I wouldn't say truest form, because recording is a very critical aspect of hip hop, especially for the rappers.
Mhm.
DJs also, they need to be recorded. But would you agree, or how much emphasis would you guys put on the performing aspect of hip hop? 3-2?
I say performance is paramount for sure. For me personally, like I kind of touched on this on the last episode, but I look at, I base my music off of performance more than recording. To me, recording is secondary because every time I envision a new song and every time that I'm, even from the point of writing it or making a beat, I'm thinking about it in terms of how it's going to come over, how it's going to be received by a crowd and the ways that I can perform it and all of that. And thinking about how I'm going to record it comes like as an afterthought. But for me, because more often than not, I debut a song at a performance rather than recording it first. So I look at and I think back to the days before, like before my time, obviously, but before we were getting a lot of rap records, and it was performance. Like the parties were performances, the
Yep.
breakers were performing, the DJs were performing for the party, the MCs were rocking the party for the people at the party, and the early tapes that were being made were tapes of the performances. They weren't going into a studio and doing all of that stuff.
Exactly.
They were somebody bringing a tape recorder to the parties and recording these performances. And it wasn't until Rapper's Delight and then a couple more after that, The Message and things like that, where the idea of going into a studio and perform and like recording a rap song became a thing. So I think that at its foundation, it's a performative art in all of the elements. And
Yep.
then the recording of it comes secondary. And I feel like it's become more necessary as technology comes and as hip hop has spread its wings and
Mm-hmm.
wrapped around the globe and all of that, like to be able to spread the messages of the music
Mm-hmm.
and the visuals of the breaking and the mixes of the DJs and things like that. Like recording has become important, but at the basis, it's all about performance.
It is a performance. And a lot of people might not consider, well, I put it like this. The out of the core four, the one that is probably, so graffiti writers are a whole different animal. When we get into that, graffiti is just different. Okay.
Right.
But they do perform,
Absolutely.
and I'm not talking about like, the competitions that they have today were like mural competitions
Right,
where
right, right,
they,
right, right.
yeah. I'm talking about more like real street graffiti,
Yeah.
hitting the trains back in New York, hitting the trains,
Hmm.
hitting walls, things like that. Like if you see some of the locations, some of the incredible, breathtaking locations that they
Hmm.
put graffiti on, to me,
Yeah.
that's because like in your head, you have to kind of like imagine how did they do that?
Right. Of
How did
course.
they even get up to that location to tag that or to, to put that art up there?
Definitely.
It's a performance.
And I mean, part of the reason why they were tagging and getting up on trains is because a lot of the trains are moving across the country. So to them, the
Yep.
aspect of having somebody cities away or states away seeing their name bombed up on the side of
Yeah.
the train or inside a train in the subway or whatever, that's their performance, and
That was their
they want
mixtape.
somebody to be like, exactly, that's how people figure out who
Yep.
they are. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. So yeah.
And DJs don't so it's like pure performers go.
Hmm.
They don't do much, like physically. Although I have seen DJs do hand spins on the turntables.
I saw that. Yeah.
So you can see DJs do that. But what they can do, like performance wise, you see them cutting with their elbows, with their spinning around,
Hmm.
cutting with their nose. I mean, they can get very performative with it too, live, but you just might not think of them as being performers in that way. But all of the core four artists have to perform at some point.
Yeah.
Hiding to be found. How has your view of performing changed since you started performing?
Quite a bit actually, because originally I started, behind the computer screen and behind the phone. So I didn't even think about performing too much. I was just
Mm-hmm.
trying to, rap. But now that I have performed, especially when I see a really good performer, I see how important that actually is, the performance in general. And so my viewpoint has definitely changed on that. And
Mm-hmm.
especially after because I talk to 3-2 sometimes. So I've talked to him about that specifically, and that's sort of becoming part of my process as well. So I'm placing a lot more emphasis on that lately.
So that's a good segue because I got questions for you guys. Best performance enhancer you guys have ever seen live or on television or anything like that. And I'm going to give you one example of my best while you guys think about it. Prince. You ever see the performance where Prince, quote unquote, had his butt cheeks hanging out?
Yeah. Yeah.
You ever seen that?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. All right. Do you know that wasn't his butt cheeks? Those were, he had his pants cut. That's cloth, flesh covered cloth patches,
Oh.
right? It's flesh covered cloth patches on his pants. So it makes it look like drove the crowd crazy. It's still an iconic performance to this day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of his costume. So that for me is like one of the most memorable performance enhancers that I can think of. So I just wanted to prime the pump. Hiding to be found. How about you? What type of what's one of the most memorable performance enhancers you've seen?
Honestly, the only thing I can think of with that for any performance is I really want the person on stage to be super into it,
Mm-hmm.
like any genre,
Mm-hmm.
rapping, rock music. Like, I think you mentioned this a long time ago as well. Like, you like to just see somebody lose themselves in the performance.
I do.
I love
I
that.
do.
I love that. I don't know if that counts as a performance enhancer, but
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
When you are willing to, because you got to be vulnerable. And when you're willing to
yeah,
be vulnerable enough to lose yourself on stage, that draws me in. I think that's interesting. Going back to Ice-T's quote, it's like the difficulty level should be high. And I think that's a very, well, might not be difficult, but it's very vulnerable. And that makes you different in my opinion. So like, I enjoy watching that. 3-2, how about you? What's one of the better performance enhancers you've seen?
So I mean, I've seen some like huge spectacles, like seen Parliament Funkadelic live, where
Ooh,
they've got the mothership on stage and George Clinton descends
yeah.
from the UFO on stage. So but like one of the ones that actually
The
impacted me
baby
the most, like,
diapers.
personally, yeah. But one of the ones that impacted me the most, that actually resonated with me and altered how I perform or enhanced how I perform was there's an MC named Pac FM who is from New York, and he was opening up for this other group that I like, and he this was at the Roxy in Denver, and
Mm,
he has this song. He's also a graffiti writer, and so he has
okay.
this song called "Click Clack Spray," which is about like bombing on a train and stuff like that, and like keeping an eye out for undercover cops in the train station
Mm-hmm.
and hiding out for them when he feels like he's being chased and stuff like that. So the song, and I didn't know this song. I didn't know any of his music before seeing this show, and so the song starts, and they had turned off all the lights in the venue, and he had this huge like canvas on stage, and he started spray painting as he was rapping, and so he's spray painting and
Oh,
starting to do graffiti while he's rapping,
oh,
and I was like, oh man, this is super dope. As the
yeah.
song being about that. And then he had a song called Stomp, where he gets off stage, he's in the middle of the crowd. The crowd forms a circle around him, and he's got everybody putting their like 1 foot forward, and he has everybody yelling and stomping at the same time in unison. So you have the whole venue. I mean, like, it was a mid-sized venue, but
Right,
everybody in this
right.
huge circle stomping and yelling stomp at the same time, with him in the
Crowd
middle, and
participation
just like the energy that you feel from
mm-hmm.
having everybody around you in unison doing that. I was like,
elevates it.
I want to be the type of performer that can get that kind of energy out of people. And so like
Mm-hmm.
seeing those two things from that person, I was like, I went home, I found every single all of his albums that I could find, and like I was just like, I became a huge Pac FM fan after that,
Yeah.
and like to this day, and I'm mad because I have these knee injuries now, so I can't perform the way that I used to. But like, I used to jump off stage and do all kinds of stuff because of what I saw him do and how electrifying that was.
Nice, nice. And like crowd participation is universal. It's not just for our core four artists, but anytime you can get the crowd into it, it does enhance any performance. So yeah, but that spray painting thing, that sounds dope. I wish I could have saw that. What did he do with the piece afterwards?
So it wasn't like he didn't complete a piece, but it was just like for the effect. So it had like the canvas had like lights coming out, so it kind of looked like a night sky, and then so the top half was black, and then it was like darker or lighter in the center. And he started a piece, but then he got into the song, and then after halfway through, he started facing the crowd again and getting more into the song. But it was more so for effect.
Got you. So opposite side of the coin. There's two things I don't really like with performers. That performers do that I don't like. So I had Prince earlier as one of my favorite. Michael Jackson on the flip side is one of my worst with pyrotechnics. Explosions on stage. Even before Michael blew himself up, I couldn't stand them because they kind of freaked me out, right? Because I'm like, it's just too many things that could go wrong with that stuff. Plus, I don't like the explosions in closed quarters and stuff. Maybe if I was out in the stadium or whatever, it might be different. But pyrotechnics,
yeah.
Yeah, it's not my jam. I can't really stand them. I think they're whack most of the time. And the other thing I really can't stand is sunglasses. I don't like sunglasses when people perform. It drives me nuts because it's the block, right? I can't connect. So hiding, like you were saying, like I like to see people lose themselves, right? But if you just, no pun intended, but if you're just hiding behind sunglasses, then you're not losing yourself to me. You're just hiding, and I don't want that, So I don't like sunglasses and I don't like pyrotechnics. So anyway, those are the two things that I can't stand. How about you? Hiding to be found. What are some of the things that you can't stand in performances?
Just like the opposite side of the coin. For the other question, I remember I was at this show in Portland one time, and it was a really good band. Like they were really decent enough, and like I was feeling it. And then I just looked back at the drummer, and he was so not into it. And he was on beat and everything. They sounded amazing, but like just the fact that he wasn't into it, I was not into them at all.
Yeah, just lose
so
it right there. I
think it's really important again with the performance thing that I didn't realize originally. But besides that, this other show, this wasn't like he didn't do this on purpose. It was accidental, but he drank before his set, I believe. And he was basically throwing up on stage while he was screaming. And it was really gross, but that was like one of my most memorable performances that I've seen. It was really gross, but it was really, really memorable.
It's burnt in there now.
Yeah, for sure.
3-2. How about you? What are some of the things you can't stand?
This is kind of a contentious thing, especially right now with the current era, but rapping over vocals.
Dude, come on, preach.
Now, I will say that, like, I get it over choruses. And I even get it if you're using it as a tool to enhance. For example, if you have it minimally, so you can maybe catch a breath that you maybe didn't get or whatever. But I feel like right now, so many people rely on that and to the point where it's a crutch for people, and it allows people to get lazy. And so I've seen people... Like, I've seen rappers get up and they're jumping around and they haven't even memorized their song. And so they're jumping around and they're messing up. And so then they just drop out and their background vocals are just going and they're just like holding the mic up and like, and the thing is,
you're just playing your song for us. You ain't
exactly. And one thing I've notice is like, and I've had some debates with people with some other MCs because I've heard some people say like, well, the only people that care about that are other artists. Like the
No,
crowd doesn't care,
no,
but I've
I do.
yeah, and I cared about it before I was even rapping, and
Right.
it takes away from it because also from an artist standpoint, it allows you to be lazy and not hone your craft as much. Because for me, when I'm thinking about performance, when I'm writing a song and when I'm rehearsing it,
Mm-hmm.
I factor in when I need to take breaths so that I can get the
Mm-hmm.
whole line out. And if I can't breathe properly, then I take a couple lines out and I figure out like, does this line still
Mm-hmm.
make sense if I take two of these words out? And if it doesn't, how do I rework the bar so that I can say less words so I can get the breath in right here? And then
Mm-hmm.
and then like how well do I know the song? If I don't know it like the back of my hand, I'm not going to perform it so that I don't have to worry about like being, and every once in a while everybody makes mistakes. I'm not saying that,
Sure.
but like
Right.
not knowing the song at all and just being like, well, it's recorded, so it's fine. I feel like it just lets people, and I could get it again if it's like you're super active and you have background vocals because you're also doing a dance routine and you've got background
Right.
dancers and you're going around to do some other play an instrument or something like that. Cool, great. I understand it. And as a tool, it's dope. But when it's a crutch and it allows you to get lazy, which I feel like so many people do now,
For
then
real.
that's when it's whack as hell to me because it's like, why am I paying money to stand here and watch you jump around to your own and vibe out to your own music? Like
You're just vibing out now. You
I
ain't
could have just
performing
put
for
this
me.
on
You just
Spotify.
vibing out.
Yeah. And so yeah, that's
You
a
know.
major thing for me.
So that brings. So Heidi, why are you laughing so much?
Oh no, because I'm enjoying this.
So yeah, ad libs. I think ad libs are fine, right? Like if your background, if your backing track has your ad libs on it, that's totally understandable, right?
Yeah.
What about what's the technique called? Punching in.
Uh-huh.
So like a lot of times you have to punch in to like rap over yourself and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
For
Uh,
recording?
yeah, when you record, because listen, I don't write, I don't record, but one of the things one of the videos I saw, whenever it was, talked about why today's rappers don't really write. It's because they just rely on punching in so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 3-2 to your point, like if you rely on punching in so much, you don't really have to craft the song. You don't have to memorize it. Performing it it's not really a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right with punching in? Punching in is like you can just kind of like if you have even a half a verse and you just record it and then you can have your producer lay it into the track wherever it needs to be. Do I understand punching in correctly?
Pretty much. Like it's basically like say you have a verse and every time you try to do the verse on this particular line, you run out of breath or you get tongue twisted because the maybe the following word is too many syllables and coming off of the previous bar, it twists your tongue up and so you get kind of confused by it or like you just can't get it right and you
Yeah.
try it for a lot of times they'll be like, okay, just say the bar up to that point and then we'll play it from the bar before and then you come in at the part fresh from where you get tongue twisted or whatever or you mess up the breath and then we'll punch in and we'll go on from there. And
Okay.
then so that way it allows people to kind of fix their mistakes without having to re-record an entire verse 400 times.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And again, that can be a great tool. But again, if you don't use it as a tool and use it as a crutch, then like you said, it can allow people to get lazy because then they don't have to work on their writing as much and they don't have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. They can just force it. And then when
Yeah.
they're on stage, they're never faced with the reality of, oh, I can't say this line live either.
Right.
So
Right.
they just drop out, let the
And
background
let
lyrics,
that
and then
background track.
yep, and then when they feel like coming back in, they come back in
Yeah.
and all that. So
So before we wrap up this topic and move to our last two segments, you should know and the gems, I have a 5 examples of performance enhancers that have traditionally been a part of hip hop, but I think have been abandoned and I would like to see come back. And then I have 2 examples of how those were deployed. So it's props, costumes, dancing, live instrumentation, and hype men. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 examples of these things. We all know Public Enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Public Enemy deployed all 5 of these things masterfully. Chuck D by himself, like at an open mic, he could kill it because he's one of the greatest rappers of all time. But just Chuck D at an open mic by himself probably gives you 30 minutes before you're like, okay, I'm good, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 20, 30 minutes. When Public Enemy deployed all 5 of these things, they went from like a 20, 30 minute set to 60 to 90 minute set. 60 to 90 minutes moves you from an opening act to headlining.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? Like you can carry a whole show with a 90-minute set, right? Like you can headline a show. So let's go props. No, I should start with dancers. Public Enemy had S1Ws,
Mm-hmm.
Security of the First World. Okay. They functioned as dancers. They did the stepping dance. They looked like they came out dressed in, as far as costumes go, they dressed in like a military fatigue, berets. Sometimes they used to use props, rifles, stuff like that, but they functioned as backup dancers for Public Enemy. Okay. As far as props go, Flavor Flav had one of the most iconic props in hip hop history, the clock around his neck, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to symbolizing what time it is. Right. So we got props, we got dancers, hype man, Flavor Flav's one of the most. Chuck D said Flavor Flav's whole job was to whatever room we walked into, Flavor Flav was supposed to be the most recognizable personality instantly. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
his whole job. He's like, we could walk into a room with kings, queens, presidents. As soon as Flavor Flav walked in, he needs everybody's attention. That was his whole job. He was one of the greatest hype men in hip hop history. So that's 3. Okay. And that's 4 because I talked about their costumes. Costumes, props, dancers, hype men, live instrumentation. What's the DJ's name? Help me out. Well, Terminator. Terminator X. Terminator X functioned as a live instrumentation. Your DJ in hip hop, we're going to get more into it later on, but like, hey, if you need a funky piano, your DJ should know a break and be able to pull up a funky piano right away. If you need a drum solo, your DJ should know where to go get a funky drum solo and play it. If you need some funky bass or whatever instrument you need, your DJ should be able to conjure it up and mix it into your set seamlessly, masterfully. That's what your DJ, he performs as like your live instrumentation. They had all 5 of those things, and Public Enemy went on to become, Hall of Famers, right? But it moved them from just opening act status when they first came out to like say headliners, because now, and I'll give you one song they had that was a great example of all of this. It's Lost at Birth. If you ever get a chance, go listen to the song Lost at Birth by Public Enemy. The video, at least the one that I saw back in the day, it was animated. It's different, but the song itself almost lays it out. But they had those 5 things. The other example I had of a group using those 5 things masterfully: costumes, props, hype men, live instrumentation, and dancers. Did I just repeat myself? Anyway, is Digital Underground. Go look at the video for Humpty Hump, the Humpty dance. The whole song's about dance for one. So there goes the dance part. Shock G, his alter ego, is one of the greatest hype men ever. Humpty Hump, right? Humpty Hump's costume was a prop. That Marco Grouch, the
Groucho Marx.
Groucho Marx, thank you. That nose thing.
Yep.
So that's the prop, the costume all together. And then in that video, you can see them, they were like playing live instruments on the stage. So, and those 5 elements, I think, have been lost. I'd like to see them returned. I'd like to see them revisited. You could go through a list of early hip hop acts that used any one of those things masterfully, like Kid and Play. They're iconic for their dance moves. Heavy D and the Boys. They had dancers in the background. DJs just absolutely dominated early hip hop with their turntablism, costumes and anybody ever heard of MC Hammer?
Right.
You think about MC Hammer, the first thing you think about is those parachute pants. As corny as you may have think those were, Hammer ran the world for about 3 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think it's too many hip hop artists of all across the board, not just rappers. Like if you're a breaker, right? If you're a breaker, what's the group? Jabberwockies?
Jabberwockies.
Jabberwockies. Just go check them out.
Oh yeah.
They're using everything. The mask, the coordinated uniforms, everything, So it's not just for rappers, but it's across the board for all of the core 4 artists in hip hop. So anyway, that's going to wrap up our whole discussion about the origin myth and the performing aspect of hip hop. We'll go to our last 2 segments, and then we're going to get out of here. You should know. So this week for You Should Know, I have chosen 2 people, maybe. We'll see. Hiding to be found. Do you still have up for Rodger?
Yeah.
Clayton?
What are you trying to say about him?
Uncle Jam's Army?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have that info pulled up?
I do, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a brief bio on him at all, or Uncle Jam's Army, a bio on Uncle Jam's Army at all?
Yeah, let me pull up this one here. Uncle Jam's Army was an American funk hip-hop collective crew based in Los Angeles, California in the 80s. Their singles, What's Your Sign, Dial a Freak, and Yes, Yes, Yes were influential to the electro, old school funk, and early West Coast hip-hop genres.
It was. So the reason I chose Rodger, and I almost want to say Alonzo Williams, but a lot of people know Alonzo Williams, the Wrecking Crew, his DJ group from LA back in the day. Ice-T, if people don't know Ice-T, people should go to school on Ice-T. Ice-T has said that there's really only 2 trees in LA hip hop. New York is wild, and it kind of, it all comes from the South Bronx, but it's got a lot of different branches. But LA is really simple. There's really only 2 trees that gave us everything we had coming out of there. One was Alonzo Williams, World Class Wrecking Crew, famously gave us Dr. Dre, NWA, that whole group of artists. The other tree is Rodger Clayton, the Martin brothers, and they had Uncle Jam's Army. And Uncle Jam's Army, they started out, they were just broke teenagers. One of the brothers had some DJ equipment. He was like, yo, let's start throwing parties, dance parties, the equivalent of raves back in the day for like teenagers who couldn't get into the real clubs. So, and at one point, they called their crew the Unique Dreams Entertainment. I think it's what it was called. And they were just party promoters. That was their whole jam. And at one point, Alonzo and Uncle Jam's Army, before they had formed those names of the camps, they were all like tight, right? But Alonzo, because of his father, he helped him out. He got a permanent location called Eve's After Dark in the heart of Compton. Uncle Jam's Army and them stayed mobile. And they were moving all around, doing stuff. They would throw their parties. And then after their parties ended, if you were brave enough, you would go to Compton to go hang out with Alonzo Williams and his whole crew. Uncle Jam's Army got so big. So their breakout party was in 1978. Yeah, it was 78, something like that. And they got so big in like 2 or 3 years. They were doing the LA Sports Arena. They were selling out the LA Sports Arena. That place at that time was on like 10,000 people. These is like 20-year-olds, just like an NBA arena for reference. Like an NBA arena, when it's sold out, might sell like 15,000. These cats were selling out $10,000 seat LA Sports arenas with just DJs. No headliner, no performing act, there was no MC, just DJs. Killing it. Absolutely killing it, man. And they gave us Arabian Prince, Egyptian Lover, DJ Pooh, Ice-T was kind of hanging out with them for a little bit. And out of that tree, you get Cypress Hill, you get the Rhyme Syndicate and a bunch of other groups that we know today. So it was really the only two trees in LA rap history. Lonzo Williams and Rodger Clayton. But I think Rodger Clayton, he passed away a while ago. I don't know the exact date, but I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did for the foundation of hip hop outside of New York, West Coast. I mean, he really gave us, what he proved was that how important a DJ was to hip hop. That Run DMC's first performance in LA was at one of their parties. Like this is how big they got just off of DJing alone. And I think Rodger Clayton is somebody who should be recognized in the history books for hip hop. So that's my You Should Know this week. Rodger Clayton and Uncle Jam's Army. All right. Next up, gems. Then we're going to get out of here. Let's start with Hiding to Be Found. Do you have any gems for us?
Yeah, actually, some new stuff I've been listening to. Actually, no, let's do the old one. It's Christoph Crane.
Oh.
Is the artist. And the album is This Will Work for Now.
Okay.
And he has I think that's the album as well. You were talking about instrumentation, and he plays guitar and stuff, like acoustic guitar. So he has like a folky twist on some things. And yeah, so him as an artist in general. He's also very, he recently released something that's all freestyles.
Okay.
Like he's everything off the top, and the producer with him, everything like on the spot as well. And they try to capture like the greatest of those moments to make that whole album. So Christoph Crane,
gotcha.
In general.
Speaking of instrumentation, and I think I've told you this before, I really enjoy when you bring in the guitar to your set. I think it's super. I think it's one of your best performance enhancers, by the way. So I just wanted to mention that. I give you props for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I got to get used to doing that, though, because I feel like it throws me off more in the performance for some reason.
You don't think so?
So
I'm not the one performing. I get to say, sitting out here in the audience, I enjoy it.
Got you. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback.
3-2. You got a gem for us.
Yes. So this is a documentary. So it's called The Freshest Kids. And yeah, I figured you'd know it. Yeah. It's one of the first hip hop documentaries that I saw, based on like the history of breaking. And like, I remember, so I was living in Vegas at the time when there was this jam that happened every Thursday night at this Hawaiian restaurant. And it was like B-boy battles and underground hip hop performances and stuff. And it didn't even start till like 3 a.m. And they would be playing The Freshest Kids on the screens, on TV screens throughout the restaurant while the thing was going on. And I was like, that looks dope. What is that? And I remember seeing it and finding it in like Tower Records and like the DVD, taking it home and watching it and just being enamored with it. Cause I love anything that has to do with the history of the culture, everything from its origins to now, and hearing them talk about everything from, and it's actually similar to how we're talking about the myth of the creation of hip hop in general, where they're talking about how the term breaking and b-boys came about. because everybody's saying it's something
Right.
different. Like some people were saying it's because they were dancing over breaks. Some were saying it's because it was a slang
Right.
term for robbing people or
Yeah.
something. And so there's like 4 different definitions, and everybody swore
Everybody,
that
yeah.
their definition was the
Herc swears
definition.
up and down
And
that
so it's like
Herc
nobody.
swears up and down that he did it. He's I used to call them my break
Yeah,
boys. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so like everybody's got their own definition, and so nobody really knows. All they know is that that's what they call themselves now.
Right.
And so like, and going into how it started, how simple it's just like emceeing, how simple it started, and how footwork and style was more paramount at the time, and the power moves didn't
A
come in until
lot
like
later,
the
yeah.
mid 80s, the early 80s, and then they started getting incorporated into that once it started becoming like popular, and once they had like what was the movie
Flashdance,
Flashdance,
yeah.
and all
Yeah.
of that came out, and then it started gaining more popularity, and people started getting more like learning more
Right.
styles and all. So anyway, like I love that, and it pretty much sparked my interest in like finding every hip hop documentary that I could get my hands
Dope.
on or lay my
Dope.
eyes on, because I just love it. And so like that's one of the first ones that I can recollect like watching and being so just struck by that it made me like go down a rabbit hole where I wanted to learn every piece of history that I could, especially since I'm so far removed
Right.
from it. I
Right.
mean, being from Colorado, I've never actually been to New York City
Me neither.
even, but loving hip hop culture and everything. And so like doing my due diligence to learn the history of the culture because I want to uplift it and uphold it as much as possible.
Dope.
So yeah, I
I'm
love
actually
that.
going to piggyback on your gems. And we hadn't even talked about this before, but I've got 3 movies, 3 visual. They're not documentaries, but they're dope. The 3 gems that I have for you are Breaking, the movie, Crush Groove, the movie, and Beat Street.
Yep.
Beat Street, out of all of them, is by far the best. Okay. Beat Street is by far the best. But if you want to peek into like, it's not authentic. It's not authentic. It has glimpses of authentic early hip hop in it. Right. But the vibe, the energy, the feeling. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Dude, I said, what'd I say? Crush Groove, Breaking, and Beat Street
and Breaking.
Wild Style. Wild Style.
Oh,
Wild
yeah.
Style.
Okay. Yep.
So I got 4 gems for you. Wild Style.
Yeah.
Anybody who's a Nas fan will pick up on Wild Style from the gate. Wild Style, out of all of them, is probably the most authentic. Although Fab Five Freddy's wilding out, and it's way too dramatized. B Street did it better, but Wild Style, Breaking, B Street, and Crush Groove. Those are my gems.
I watch all of those movies at least twice a year.
You know, like I got the DVDs, the whole night. Right?
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And they all stream on Tubi, I'm pretty sure too. So
If you haven't seen them, you got to go see them. Again, it's not authentic, but anyway, those are my gems. Those 4 movies will give you a really good sense of what early authentic hip hop felt like, if nothing else. Not exactly what it looked or sounded like, but what it felt like. So anyway, that's it for this episode. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to get out of here. I want to thank you for participating. Thank you for getting down. What are we covering on our next episode? Oh, okay. Next episode, we're going to discuss the phrase hip hop and where did it come from. So again, thanks everybody for listening. Peace.
Bye.
Peace.
I forgot to introduce y'all. Y'all got to
Sorry, we're still getting our footing.
Y'all just
We're still getting our footing. It's all good.
Yeah.